we'll see if anyone's interested in tonight's topic, which is about Alberta separation. There's something called the Alberta Prosperity Project that is garnering signatures right now for a referendum on the question of whether or not Quebec should hold a referendum, or rather Quebec, Freudian slip, whether or not Alberta should hold a referendum on separating from Canada. And this is Max, the wonder dog, who's getting up on the table. Don't climb up on the table. Get down. Come here. Come here. I've got a treat for him. Come on down. Come down. Come here. Here. Come and get it. Try not to sit. Shake. Lay down. 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 Lay down. Come up. By giving him a treat, hopefully he'll give me some peace for the duration of this podcast. We'll see how long it goes. I'm here to express an opinion. As things currently stand, I don't think that the support for a referendum is significant enough to win a referendum. I do think that the 178,000 signatures needed to trigger a referendum will be easily obtained, but I do not believe that that the level of support currently is sufficient to get 50% plus 1% of the population of Alberta to vote yes to the question of separating from the rest of Canada. And some news came out recently, interesting news, especially the way it's being reported, about elements within the separatist movement, members of the separatist movement who are being described as, I love the word, fringe and extremist, the usual language we hear from the CBCs of this world, not journalism. Basically, I always say it on this channel. I haven't said it for a while, but the media is there to tell you what to think, what to believe, and how to feel about things. So they want you to think and feel that these Alberta separatists, that they're fringe, that they're extreme right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which I do not believe to be the case at all. I think the vast majority of those advocating for separating, they're doing it on the basis of human rights. On a large part of it has to do with the economic reality of Canada and our system of transfer payments, where the wealthy provinces subsidize the have-not provinces, and a lot of Albertans are annoyed with the level of support that they provide financially to, in particular, Quebec, and they've had enough. But again, I still don't think that the support is there to ultimately win a referendum. Again, I do think there is enough support to get the 178,000, roughly the number, signatures needed to trigger the referendum. What is needed to have a referendum put forward? A group like this Alberta Prosperity Project needs to get a petition signed by 10% of the voting population as of the last provincial election. So in the last provincial election, go lay down, Max. In the last provincial election held in Ottawa, it's telling me up in and around just under 1.8 million Albertans voted in the last provincial election. Like 1.78 million people voted, so they need to get 178,000 signatures, roughly a little less, in order to trigger Daniel Smith's government putting forward a question of putting it to Albertans. Do you want to remain in Canada, or do you want to separate and become an independent country? If Quebec were, and I keep doing that, apologies, I'm not comparing Alberta and Quebec at all. It's just that whenever the word separation comes to mind, immediately I default to Quebec and not Alberta. And that's because Quebec has had two referendums on separation, one in 1984 and the other one, I think it was 1992. The one in 1984, separation was defeated handily, like 60-40 in that neighborhood. The 1992 or thereabouts referendum, that one was razor thin. I think it was less than 1,000 votes. It was basically 59 point something, or rather 49 point something who voted yes, and just over 50% who voted no to remain in Canada. What are your thoughts? Put them into the live chat. My Where I do think that support for separation will be highest is in places like Drumheller, Carstairs, Hinton, small rural areas. When it comes to the big cities of Calgary and Edmonton, I do not think there is much support in the major urban centers at all. Even in smaller urban centers like, say, Lethbridge and Red Deer, I think that there will be reticence that there the number of recently arrived Canadians who now have citizenship and voting rights uh, is particularly high in Calgary and in Edmonton, and the presence of a large community of newer Canadians will influence the greater body politic in those cities and in Lethbridge and in places like Red Deer. When it comes to rural Alberta, I think the separatists will do very well, 40, 50%, maybe 50% plus one. But they're small areas. I'm not sure Calgary's population has to be, the greater Calgary area has to be two plus million, 2.5 million. Edmonton is probably 1.5 to 2 million in the greater metropolitan area. And Alberta as a whole, I haven't checked recently, but if memory serves, the population for the entire province is somewhere between 5 and 6 million. So pretty much half the province lives in the major, half the population lives in the major urban centers of Calgary, number one, Edmonton, number two. Sharunian is here. Sharunian has invited me to to become on his podcast, his YouTube channel tomorrow. That's dropping at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. But this is we're talking about Alberta separation, or the possibility of it. And right now it's 8:13 in Alberta Mountain Time. I'm Eastern Standard. So is Sharunian. Well, I see there are a number of people watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the live chat about this question of Alberta separation. I got into a conversation with someone online who had written something I agree with 100%. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring it up and try and read it. He put it out publicly, so it's in the public domain. So I'm going to share what he wrote. These are not my words, although I agree with them pretty much 100%. I am sympathetic to the move for separation, for the move for the creation of a new country called Alberta, or whatever name they choose to give it. The Western Republic of Alberta, the Republic of Alberta, the Commonwealth of Alberta. Goodness knows what name would they give it. I'm scrolling through his feed right now. This gentleman's name is M.D. Lewis. I've actually been in touch with him and have invited him to come on to be interviewed, to have a discussion about this. And he's not averse, but he is a trucker. And he's out on the road. He's OTR, on the road. So we're going to revisit it when he has some time off, when he's back at home. And I found it. He published this to his Facebook timeline on January 16th. So again, these are not my words, but I've read this post and I agree with everything he wrote. And here's what he said: I'm done pretending this conversation is something it isn't. And he goes on to say, I'm a white male Christian conservative living in Alberta. I live in Ontario. And he says, I make no apologies for it. I'm also firmly pro Alberta separation because what's happening to this country is happening without my consent. Let's start with the fact people hate acknowledging. White people are a global minority. Roughly 15% of the world's population is of European descent. That's it. The other 85% of the world is not. So the endless talk of global white dominance is dishonest on its face. And before anyone twists this into something it is not, I do not believe in race as a biological hierarchy. Race is a social construct, always has been. What I do believe in is culture. And culture is not just food, music, or holidays. Culture is the type of government a society builds, the laws it enforces, the infrastructure it designs and maintains, the social norms that create trust and order, the inventions, institutions, and ideas that shape daily life. By that definition, Canada, the US, and Europe did not happen by accident. Modern Western civilization, constitutional government, individual rights, things like freedom of speech, equality under the law, advanced infrastructure, scientific progress, and high trust society was created by a small global minority, not because of skin color, but because of values, institutions, and cultural foundations rooted, rooted in Western and Christian traditions. That matters. Immigration itself is not the issue. Mass immigration without limits, without integration, and without public consent is. What is happening now is not normal. Immigration, what is happening now is not normal immigration. It's demographic transformation driven by federal policy imposed from the top down and justified by moral blackmail. The people the people pushing it will never live with the consequences. Alberta will. And Alberta did not ask for this. Alberta did not vote for this direction. Alberta did not consent to becoming a laboratory for ideological experiments designed in Ottawa, Toronto, or global institutions that do not share our values or priorities. I'm gonna stop reading it there, and you can read it yourself. I'll give a link. Let's see. Um, I'll give you a link to his profile. It's public, and this was written just on January 16th, if anyone wants to read it. Great writing, and it goes on more. So if you want to read that gentleman's thoughts, hopefully he will come on. Hopefully um, he's open to discussing this. I know that we had a brief discussion online in what do you call it? Messenger, chatting back and forth. I told him my opinion with respect to an ultimate referendum vote and how I don't think it would pass. He vehemently disagrees. He's boots on the ground. He's in Alberta. He's involved with collecting signatures, he says, and his perception is vastly different from my own. I don't know precisely where he lives, whether he's in rural Alberta, whether he's in around in the city or around the suburbs of Calgary, Edmonton. I do not know. And I suspect that those who live in Drumheller, in Carstairs, in Hinton, in the smaller rural areas, that there is the very real potential that people will get the impression that, hey, everyone's for separation because everyone I talk to. But it's this old analogy of being in a bubble. If you're in an echo chamber where you're only hearing your thoughts, views, and opinions coming back at you, you're not seeing the forest for the trees. What's the sentiment like in Calgary? What's the sentiment like in Edmonton? What's the sentiment like in smaller but still urban centers like Lethbridge and Red Deer? And the impression I have is that even some of those who are now signaling that they will support, that they're putting their name down to have a referendum vote on this, when push comes to shove, when in a few months' time, I suspect, 3, 4 months from now, the signatures will be sufficient. I understand the Alberta Prosperity Project doesn't want to just get the minimum 10%, 178,000 votes required to trigger, or signatures required to trigger the referendum. I believe they're aiming for 1 million because they want to demonstrate not to the government of Alberta, Danielle Smith's UCP governing party, but to Alberta as a whole, that this is not a fringe minority movement, that this is mainstream, that there are a lot of Albertans who are fed up. The only thing is, wait until the fear mongering starts. When when the pro sovereigntist side in Quebec back in the 90s, when they lost that referendum by a whisker, a lot of them blamed fear mongering and propaganda coming out of Ottawa and federalist forces trying to scare the population. You're going to lose your pension. You're going to lose all these federal benefits. What about mail delivery? That's Canada Post. You don't have a currency, and they try and. The pro-separatist side in Quebec, back during that referendum, they said that it was interference from Ottawa that tipped the balance and is what defeated separation in Quebec. Now we have the story coming out. I think the Financial Times or the Financial Post said that there was a secret meeting between elements of this Alberta Prosperity Project, like a fringe group within the larger umbrella of the separatist movement. This little fringe group met clandestinely with members of the Trump administration, members of the federal US government. And my attitude is, it's clandestine. Well, it's not clandestine if it's in the Financial Times and it's being reported in the Calgary Herald and in the CBC News. So it's hardly clandestine if everyone knows about it. And would the US be interested in seeing Canada break up, in seeing Alberta separated? And I think certainly within the context of the Trump administration, for sure. Trump has made open overtures that he wants Canada as the 51st state. And if we're weaker, it makes that prospect even greater. Because can you imagine what this country would look like after a negotiated separation? I mean, what would happen? It's a mess what would happen if I did it again, if Alberta votes to separate a year from now, 6 months from now, whenever it takes place, and I do think it's coming. And if they were to vote yes to separate, then it's not okay. We voted to separate, and the very next day there is an independent nation state called Alberta. No, there would have to be negotiations between the government in Alberta and the government of Canada, and things get incredibly complicated at this point. Is Alberta responsible for a portion of Canada's accumulated federal debt? And I think most reasonable people would say yes. Okay, you're 6 million out of 40. Do the math, whatever percentage that works out to. I don't even know. Let me check. 5 divided by 40. We'll just go with that as a rough guesstimate. And you get 12 and a half. So let's say 15%, because I know they're over 5 million. So we have $1 trillion debt. $150 billion is the responsibility of Alberta. But then Alberta likewise would say, okay, if you're going to saddle us with the liabilities, you also then have to provide for us. We get 15% of the federal accumulated assets. What about all the embassies that Canada has in Europe and Japan, all over the world. Our embassy in Japan is said to be enormously valuable. Do Albertans then get a 15% stake in that? Well, do they get 15% of the equipment owned by the Canadian Armed Forces? Not that they necessarily want it, but it's there. There are weapons, there are tanks, there are fighter jets, although they're 40-year-old Hornets that half of them are being used as Frankensteins to keep the other ones going. But we've got some, we give them, we give Alberta half of one of our broken down old diesel submarines? These are assets. It gets incredibly complex. And the world is moving in scary directions. I almost feel like the Alberta separation movement is something of a distraction to the broader global problems that are facing the world. I think we're seeing the rise of China, and it's been going on for 20, 30 years, that China has been climbing higher and higher, and the US for the longest time has been in decline. Some might argue, and I think there's some rationale for it, that with Trump back in office, that decline has slowed and maybe even stopped. The United States may even be ascending somewhat. Certainly, if they were to gain control of Greenland, then, now the US is rising, and China and the United States are the two dominant global players right now, and they are coming. A fight is coming. And not right now, not tomorrow, not next month, not in 6 months, but in a year or two, maybe three, uh, the United States and China are going to be going at it. Right now, this is the warm up. This is the setup. This is the arranging of the pieces on the board. Trump, his actions down in Venezuela, part of that, yes, Venezuela provides very little oil to the world. They have massive reserves, but their socialist system basically destroyed. In a way, Venezuela is a little. Venezuela treated its oil the way that Ottawa treats Alberta's oil. They ignore it. And so, but much of that oil went to China. Now, has it impacted them greatly that they're not getting Venezuelan oil anymore? Not too much. However, now we have the situation in Iran, and we have US warships in the Persian Gulf, off the coast of Iran. And there's a question, are we going to be looking at the US intervening directly in what seems to be a burgeoning second revolution in that country? They had a revolution in 78, 79 that overthrew the Shah of Iran, pro-Western government, and it became the nation, the republic, the Islamic Republic of Iran, with the Ayatollahs in charge and the mullahs, and became a Shia Islamic theocracy. So, where are things going to go? No one is talking in the live chat. Am I crazy? Do you think Alberta will separate? Do you think Quebec would separate? Their separatist movement is now picking up. Saint Pierre Plamondon is the name of the leader of the Bloc Québecois. They are polling. They are, according to the polling, they are poised to form the next government in Quebec, which would be sometime in October. And they are the Parti Québecois, their leader. They are signaling that if we, the Parti Québecois, form the next government, we are going to hold a third referendum. I find it somewhat ironic that, Quebec could find itself second in line in terms of wanting to separate from Canada. If Alberta separates, Quebec would be next. And then what happens to Canada? Do we tighten our relationship with China? because I'm certain that wants to, China refers to itself as a near Arctic player, near Arctic player. They don't have any actual political territory on the Arctic Circle. When it comes to the countries that actually are Arctic nations, the United States because of Alaska, us because Northwest Territories, none of it. Yukon, we're Arctic. Denmark is Arctic because of Greenland. Uh, and then Russia, of course, and then Finland, Sweden, Norway. These are the Arctic nations. But if Denmark were to lose Greenland, they're no longer an Arctic country. Anyway, lots to unpack, lots to think about. Uh, no one seems to be engaging, so I'll end it there. We'll see what happens. We'll see whether or not I think it is a slam dunk that this Alberta Prosperity Project, they will garner the 178,000 odd signatures that they need. There will be a referendum within 6 months to a year, and the landscape could change. My opinion could change. There could be a big shift. Nancy has shown up, and she is of the opinion that Quebec won't separate, that there are too many peons, only want to separate for the language and what they call Quebec's identity, which has been long dead. My own take on Quebec's separation is that the kids are. The younger generation is too fully integrated with the younger Quebec population. They are citizens of the world, and they're largely bilingual, and they don't feel the same threat from the English speaking world the way older generations did. And those of my generation, I'm going to be 60, but those my age and older in Quebec will remember a time when, if you lived in Trois-Rivières, if you lived in rural Quebec, and even in the cities, all the major businesses were owned by English interests. And if you were a French only Quebecois, you could only be a factory worker, and if you wanted to be or a mill worker, and if you wanted to aspire, the highest you could go might be foreman, provided you learned to speak English well enough to talk to the executive branch, which were all English and didn't speak French. But that is all gone. Nancy's of the opinion that Alberta I should note that Eat Me, Nancy, she is Quebecoise. She is from Montreal. She's saying that Alberta will do it way before Alberta will separate, long before Quebec. Be interesting to see number one, Alberta first has to separate, and the way things are currently, I don't think they would. But got to allow for a changing landscape. There could be an earthquake, some society-wide earthquake that changes the landscape completely, and I might change my opinion. But as things stand right now, I cannot see Alberta separating. I think, once they have a vote on it, after they get the signatures, what's going to happen is you'll have the campaign. What about Canada Post? What about, transportation authority? What about, all the federal infrastructure projects? We're going to all be cut off. What about my Canadian passport? You know, how much is it going to cost for us to set up our own immigration system, our own central bank, and print Alberta currency, and to create our own military? Oh my gosh, we'll be bankrupt. And those kind of considerations will push many into the no, let's stay in Canada side. And my guess would be at most, the separatist vote would maybe get up around 33%. The absolute top I could ever see it getting is 40, but my guess would be somewhere 30-ish percent. Nancy goes on to say, Quebec's true identity lies in Catholicism, which all politicians reject for the new state religion. And the new state religion in Quebec is secularism, laïcité, as they call it out there. And there was a time when Quebec was a very devoutly Roman Catholic province, had the highest church attendance in all of Canada. Now it's the polar opposite. Nobody goes to church in Quebec. The Roman Catholic churches, when you drive through rural Quebec, they're the most prominent, the highest. Quite often, you go La Portière, Trois Pistoles, these towns, cities, villages, not the big Montreal, but just driving around, Saint Jerome, wherever, the biggest building and the highest building in town would always be the church. And it was full on a Sunday. Not anymore. Now it's empty. No one goes except the very old. Uh, and Amy's saying Gen Z and younger, that they as well reject faith. They reject the Roman Catholic faith. And the one thing is, they've left Catholicism behind, but they've also, I would say, thrown the baby out with bathwater, and they've rejected Christ. They haven't just rejected Rome, but in rejecting Rome, they're also rejecting a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that is dangerous. And that's why you see Quebec is probably the most quote unquote progressive woke left province in Canada. And so they're progressing the fastest toward that proverbial cliff. They're going over the waterfall first. At any rate, thank you for watching. I injected a little bit of faith there in at the end. The relationship with Christ is primary. Rome, or with Pentecostalism or Methodism or Reformism or any other faith. And Nancy is of the opinion that BC is worse. She doesn't think that Quebec has gone as far off the deep end as BC. Fair enough. I know more about Quebec than I do BC. I've never actually been to British Columbia. I have been to Alberta, but I haven't been to BC. And of course, I used to live in Quebec. So, at any rate, it should be noted before I wrap it up, Premier Eby of British Columbia is calling the meeting between an element of the Alberta Separatist movement and U.S. government federal officials. He's referring to it as treasonous. It's treason to meet up with representatives of a foreign government in hopes of promoting Alberta separation. And I say BS, garbage, nonsense. It's not treasonous. Your self-determination is allowed within Canada. We're allowed to advocate to separate, and there's nothing wrong with seeking out help, whether that help come from within the broader Canada or in the United States or anywhere else overseas. When the United States had its revolution against Great Britain, they sought outside help. They got help from France and they got help from the Spanish. Lafayette. So, at any rate, I'm going to leave it there. 30 odd minute video, ending the way I usually do. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord God Almighty make his face to shine upon you, and may he grant you peace. And we'll see what happens in the days ahead. There's tons happening in the world. Minnesota, Alberta separation, calls of treason. Goodness knows, there's always a lot going on in the world. So I thank you for watching, and we'll see you back in a night or two or three, whatever it happens to be. God bless.